episode, our season finale book club episode, and I'm joined again by author Julie Mae Cohen, whose books Bad Men and Eat, Slay, Love I read last year. She's a standout author for me. Julie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kendall.
Now, I have to ask the obvious question, which is, do you like to read, and what is your relationship to reading?
I read constantly. I have to read all the time. I have books on every surface of my house.
Now, have you always been a big reader?
Yes, always. Huge reader. We lived my house was right up the road from the local library. So I could walk there, even as quite a small child. I could just walk down the hill, go to the children's library, come back with a stack of books. And, I'd have read half of one by the time I got home. I lived that down there and I loved it. And our children's librarian was such a sweet lady when I was growing up. Her name was June Plummer, and she was just the best. And I would just go down there and I'd hang out with her and I'd get out tons of books to read. I have only one bone to pick with her. She's passed away. But I loved her and she knew that I loved her. And I only had one bone to pick with her, which is that she would not let me take out Judy Blume's Forever when I was 10 or 11 years old. Well, do you know Judy Blume's Forever?
I haven't read that one.
Okay, so Judy Blume's Forever is pretty famous for being a book about a relationship between two teenagers who lose their virginity to each other, and it's depicted within the book. And the famous thing that everybody knows about Forever is that they name his penis Ralph.
Interesting. So it was quote unquote too inappropriate for you at that age, apparently. Gotcha.
Too grown up. Yeah.
What
she didn't know is that by then I was reading like Stephen King, Danielle Steel. I had really read all about this, and Ralph was pretty tame.
Yeah. You're like Matilda. You're like, no, I've advanced this. That's funny. That's really funny. Now, has your taste in books and especially genres that you read changed over time, or have you always been interested? Because we discussed in the last episode, the two books I read of yours are kind of more feminist thriller and fun, and then you write kind of relationship and like other books and under your real name, Julie Cohen. So do you read in that genre, and have you always read in the same genre?
I read everything.
Okay.
I have always read everything that I can get my hands on. The only difference now is that I tend not to read in my genre as I'm writing it. So I take a break while I'm actually writing the book, because I don't want to be unduly influenced by somebody else.
Yes.
Either, inadvertently, stealing an idea or seeing I don't think I would inadvertently steal an idea, but you have your book planned out and then you read somebody else and they've done the same thing and you're like, oh, what do I have to change? My reading tastes have not changed a huge amount since I was a kid. I really love reading everything. I think the way that they've changed the most is that I tend to read a lot more female authors and queer authors now. And that's partly because a lot more female and queer authors are being published, especially in genre fiction. When I was growing up, I loved science fiction and I loved fantasy, and there weren't that many female authors. Ursula Guin, who I mentioned in the other half of your podcast, the other episode, she is just like a goddess in every way. And so I read her crazy, and I read like Agatha Christie. But I read a lot of male authors because that's just what was around. And we have such a great wealth of female and queer authors now. That I really, and authors who are not white as well. So I'm reading a lot fewer straight white men than I used to when I was growing up. And I am sort of glad. I'm glad of that, but I can also see how reading so many straight white men when I was a teenager affected my thinking and introduced me to a view of women that is not necessarily lifelike.
Yes. Have you ever read Unlikable Female Characters the Women Pop Culture Wants You to Hate?
No, I have not. Who's that by?
Anna Bogutskaya. I don't know if I'm mispronouncing her last name, but she is a author. She has a new book that came out about horror, Feeding the Monster, and she's a podcast host. But she really takes every kind of stereotype that women have in shows and movies and literature, and also gives you an example. And it really just like not it shouldn't have taken me out by surprise as much as it had, because obviously we all have our own like internal biases, but to see her explain kind of the characters that, you know, you, for example, in the show Ozark, she's like, so many people love Jason Bateman's character, who's the male lead, and they find his wife very annoying, but they're both very similar in this way. And the only reason we would find her annoying, etc., and kind of putting it in that perspective really just
There's
changed it.
Breaking Bad. So everybody hates Skylar in Breaking Bad, and she's such a good character, but everybody hates her because she gives Walt a hard time.
And see, it's like those kind of things that once you see them, you like can't unsee them. And I wonder now, if I reread certain books, would I have a different kind of perspective, you know?
Yeah,
And
there are certain books that really don't stand up now, you know, from the way that I loved when I was a kid, you know.
yeah,
A lot of, and I adore Stephen King. He is a wonderful, wonderful writer, and I just adore him. But some of his early female characters are just awful. And I'm not talking
yeah,
about Carrie. Carrie was good, but the sort of secondary characters in some of his books are just terrible cliches, and very lazy. But you know, he evolves and changes as a writer too. And a lot of characters. I remember reading fantasy where the women were nothing except for sex objects, and
yeah,
thank God that doesn't happen now. That's
yeah.
not the prevalent in the best-selling fantasy now.
Now, you
Yeah.
said audiobooks. What is your preferred method of reading?
I don't like ebooks. I just don't get on with them. I like a physical book. And I don't listen to fiction audiobooks. I really only listen to nonfiction and audiobooks, and narrative nonfiction. So I listen to a lot of true crime, or that book I was talking about in the last episode, In Control by Jane Monckton Smith. That's not a true crime book, but it's a nonfiction book, which
Yes.
but is nonetheless narrative. And I like to listen to narrative nonfiction as that way. And I like to read a paperback for fiction. I don't really even like a hardback. I like a paperback.
I agree. I like paperback. I don't really like a hardback. Now, what is a book that you haven't read, but multiple people have told you you should?
Oh gosh, everybody was telling me to read All Fours last year. 2024 was the year that every single person recommended Miranda July's All Fours, but I have actually read it, so that doesn't count.
Yes, I've heard good things.
It is good.
Okay.
It is good. I have thoughts. It is very good. It surprised me. And there's a lot in it about female sexuality, which is I found really resonant. So that everybody was recommending that book to me, and so I read that. What's the one that everybody? Oh no. Lots of people recommended Lessons in Chemistry to me, and I have not read that. Well, no,
I've read that.
Yeah, a lot of people recommended that to me, and I haven't read that. And Orbital, that won the Booker Prize, a lot of people recommended that to me as well.
I haven't heard of that one, but okay, note that. What is a book you would suggest to people if they loved Eat, Slay, Love, or Bad Men? Or any of your books, honestly. But
yeah, well, I mean, if you love that feminist thriller, I was mentioning my friend Katy Brent's How to Kill Men and Get Away with It. That's great fun. Just really funny. Really funny. There's one called, Alexia Casale wrote one called How to Bury Your Husband. That is also good. Set in the during the pandemic, when domestic violence rates went way up. So it's about domestic violence, and the author actually works with domestic violence victims. So it's based in reality. On a true crime front, oh my goodness, what's it called? It's over there. This is my problem. I'm so visual with books. Before I can remember their title, I'm like, I know where they are in the house. Here it is. It's called Savage Appetites by Rachel Monroe.
Ooh.
It is nonfiction, and it is true crime, but what it's about is about women who insert themselves into real crimes. So women who are completely
Oh.
unrelated who insert themselves into crimes, and part of it is examining why women are so interested in true crime, but then it has case histories of women who have become very close to real life cases. For example, a woman who moves into the bungalow on the estate where Sharon Tate was killed by the Manson family.
Oh, I would love this book. I want to
Okay.
read this. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I've read it
Okay.
twice. It's excellent.
Okay.
So that is a really good one. It's not fiction, obviously,
Mhm.
but it's really
Now,
fantastic. Oh,
what are some of your favorite books of all time?
see, this is the one that I knew that I was going to have to answer. Do you know what's interesting is that I don't know how your other guests come to this question, but so many times when people ask me what my favorite books are all times, they're books that I've read before I was 25.
Oh, interesting.
I wonder if that's happened to your other guests with what they've chosen. And I always just go back to that.
Oh my gosh, I never thought about that. But I mean, my answer to this is like Lord of the Flies or, you know, Red Queen, which I read in my like very early 20s or like in college. And it's true. And granted, I read a lot more now. And so it's very hard to like kind of pick. And there's so much that I love, but it's true. And I wonder how much of that is based on the how impressionable we were or like truly, I mean, the dystopian genre for me was so influential in when I was in high school and college and I just felt rage or frustration in the world and like it allowed, you know, to see the world and for what it could be and that was scary or exciting and like there was so much fascination with that. But it's interesting that you say that. Nobody has ever said that, but it's so true.
Mm. When people ask me, I always go back, and it's
Yeah.
weird, but I think it's what you said. They're the books that you read when you were forming yourself.
Yeah.
So they are your most important books. Um, I when I'm asked this question, I usually say it's very hard for me to choose a favorite, but I do
Hmm.
know a book that changed my life. I
Okay.
do know two books that changed my life.
Okay.
One of them was A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Guin, which is
Mm.
what I mentioned before because that was the book that made me want to be a writer.
Yes.
Um, the other one was The Complete Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle.
Mm.
And I'm not even, a huge Sherlock Holmes fan anymore. But I was the most enormous Sherlock Holmes fan when I was 11, 12 years old.
Yeah.
Like so crazy about that. And that is what led me, my obsession with Victorian England was what led me to move here to the UK. And it's
Mm.
what led me to study English literature and to
Mm.
specialize in Victorian literature as I did. And I wrote a Victorian novel, a historical novel as well. So reading that when I was 11 really did change the trajectory of my interests in a huge,
Mm.
um, so that book literally did change my life in a
Yeah.
very concrete and obvious way.
Yeah. I'm not a rereader only because I have been consumed by all the books that I haven't read yet, but there are books I'd obviously like to reread. And so you do that. How do you pick the books you want to reread? And each time that you reread them, do you feel like you get a little bit more or something different from them?
Yeah, it's comfort. Rereading is
Yeah.
comfort. It's like, your old pair of jeans or
Yes.
your favorite chocolate bar. It's really comfort. So
Yeah.
I reread Sherlock Holmes for comfort. I reread Georgette Heyer for comfort. Oh, the Grand Sophie, which unfortunately has you just ignore. There's a big anti-Semitic bit like about three-quarters of the way through. You just ignore that. The rest of the book is perfection. um uh I reread every few years. I reread Watership Down uh by Richard Adams, or I reread The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper.
Mm.
Um, I or Cyrano de Bergerac by Emma Rostand. I every few years I just reread them because all of those books stand up really well still, and except for the Grand Sophie with that terrible anti-Semitic bit. But and I just remember them. The cadence of the language is still there in my head.
Yeah.
I can probably recite passages from them because they're, right now you've got me because I've just finished books, 2
Mhm.
manuscripts. I have been buying, I think I've bought like 7 books in the past week and a half, and I'm just trying to read them all.
Julie, thank you so much for being here. This was lovely. This was such a good time. I appreciate you taking any ounce of your time to chat with me. So thank you so much.
It's such a treat to chat books with another reader. It's such a joy.